Hi, it's John. Welcome to my channel, EV Intuition, where I help you understand about electric vehicles. I give you the good and bad, the pro and the con. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the EPA range. What does that value mean? And how useful is it? So let's get into it. Before I get into the topic today, I'd ask that you subscribe to my channel for many videos in regards to different aspects of electric vehicles. In today's episode, we're talking about the EPA range of electric vehicles. But I think it's helpful to take a step back and think about range in terms of gas or internal combustion engine vehicles. When I thought about this, I can't recall ever thinking about range or knowing about the range of the gas vehicles that I've purchased and owned. Now, obviously, over time, I get an idea of how much range they have, but in the purchasing aspect of it, I don't think about it much. And in fact, if you go to a website, which I'm showing you the web page that shows the top level specs of a Toyota Camry, you can see that you'd be hard pressed to find any information about the range of a gas vehicle. It's just not there. What they give you is the efficiency in miles per gallon, both city and highway, and range is left off. So that's one aspect. The other thing is, if you look at the fuel economy portion of the window sticker, which is required on all vehicles, here I'm showing you another one of the Toyota Camry, you will notice that there is no information about range in that portion of that sticker. It just gives you the efficiency. What I've learned from this is that range is not that important in gas vehicles. Obviously, it's not an important deciding factor in people's buying decision. I think the EPA expects that most people would take the efficiency of the vehicle and multiply it by the size of the gas tank to get range. And I went on the EPA fueleconomy.gov website, and they do actually have range values there, but that's the only place I typically found them. So in general, the range of gas vehicles starts from anywhere from 300 to over 500, 600 miles. Most people with that type of range and all gas vehicles falling in between them are not too concerned about it. Well, now let's talk about the range in electric vehicles. In 2012, the EPA introduced a new fuel economy sticker for vehicles, all vehicles, but one of the key aspects of it is that for plug-in hybrid vehicles and fully electric vehicles, they would include a range. You won't find any range figures in a regular hybrid, but starting with plug-in hybrids, and certainly with fully electric or battery electric vehicles, you will always find a range. So I'm showing you here a plug-in hybrid, the Prius Prime fuel economy portion of the window sticker. And you can see I've highlighted that for a plug-in hybrid, there's actually two ranges listed: the electric portion range, which was 25 miles, and then the gas portion, which was 640. Now, let's take a look at a couple of electric vehicles that I have owned, and I pulled the fuel economy portion of the window sticker out for both of these, and I've highlighted the range on these. The Ford Mach-E all-wheel drive standard battery had a range of 211 miles, while my current Tesla Model Y long range showed a EPA range of 330 miles. Quite a big difference, and one of the reasons I went with the Tesla instead of the Ford Mach-E. You can find the EPA ranges of electric vehicles very easily by going to the fueleconomy.gov site, or some websites do a nice job of pulling that information together. For example, here you'll see one from Electrek that shows some of the top EPA ranges of electric vehicles. And in the top, 21 vehicles, they range from 310 to 516 miles of EPA range. So that seems pretty good. So what does this EPA range of electric vehicles tell you? It clearly wasn't on the gas vehicles, but it's on electric vehicles. And I guess I can understand why the EPA decided to put range in electric vehicles. is because in 2012, when this new format of the fuel economy stickers came out, electric vehicles, the modern day electric vehicles, were just starting to appear. We're talking the Nissan Leaf, the Teslas, etc. So I understand that there is value in knowing the range of an electric vehicle, but what does this range really telling us? So you can see on the screen here some of the key points that the EPA is doing in their range tests. First of all, it's important to know that these EV range tests can be done by the manufacturer. They just need to follow the script, and they're done indoors in perfect conditions. So they give you the optimal range of a vehicle. I wanted to point out also that there are a couple aspects of it that I think lead to some problems with this value. The first thing that I want to point out is that you do have an option of which tests to run in determining the range. A manufacturer can choose between the single cycle test or the multi-cycle test. In both those tests, they do a city and a highway range test, but they are slightly different. And I see the problem with this is that it gives the manufacturers a choice on which resulting value to use. And obviously a manufacturer is likely to take the more optimal value, the one that looks best for that particular vehicle. So I think that's one problem with the EPA range. Now, there's been some companies such as Edmunds did a nice job, and I'm showing you on the screen here, Edmunds doing their own range test. So they put together their own range test, which included a combination of city and highway, and kind of compared it with the results from the EPA. And you can see how various vehicles did in the Edmunds test versus the EPA. And I think this is useful because it solidifies one test and maybe gives some more real-world results to the EPA results. But the other thing that I want to point out here, in going back now to the EPA test, is that it is a combination, or it's weighted part city and part highway. And in fact, as you can see, that 55% of the weight is for city and 45% for highway. Now, when I thought about this, I asked myself, well, where do I really want to understand range? And I don't think it's in the city driving. When I drive in the city, I very seldom go more than 100 miles, but clearly no more than a couple hundred miles in a day. So range is not that important for me when I'm doing city driving. Where it's really important to me is in highway driving. The range in highway driving will indicate how often I'll need to refuel, or in the case of electric vehicles, recharge that vehicle. So range of city doesn't mean too much. So I think that's another problem associated with that EPA range value. It combines city and highway. Now, important thing to note in regards to that is the difference between gas vehicles and electric vehicles, between their city range and highway range. And it's a very important fact to know that electric vehicles are the opposite of gas vehicles. For we're familiar with gas vehicles, and I'm showing you a chart here of the range of a gas vehicle as compared to its speed. And notice, as we all are familiar with, that the range of a gas vehicle is much better on the highway than it is in the city. And that graph that I'm showing you kind of indicates that. That's why when you look at the gas vehicles, the efficiency, the miles per gallon, is always higher on the highway portion than the city portion. When they give you a combined value, you really do better on the highway. And that's another reason why range is not as important on a gas vehicle. Now, in an electric vehicle, the range is better in city driving than it is in highway. Why is this? For a couple reasons. First of all, it's the characteristics of the drivetrain, right? An electric motor has its best efficiency at lower speeds, whereas a gas engine has its best efficiency at higher speeds. I looked at some data for electric vehicles to show some curves of the efficiency of the electric vehicle as a function of speed. And you can see here's one chart that I saw on the website. It's pretty old, so I don't want to stress it too much, but it kind of shows you the curve of how the efficiency of an electric vehicle lowers as the speed increases. So the faster you go, the less mileage or less range you're going to get out of an electric vehicle. And in fact, I use this program that gathers data from my Tesla that keeps track of some of the actual information that I've experienced in my Tesla. And I'm showing you that particular chart here, which shows the efficiency of my Tesla Model Y as a function of speed. And notice how it drops, not as smoothly as the previous curve I showed you, but this is real data of my Tesla Model Y. And you can see how, as you speed up, the efficiency decreases, which means you're going to get less range at the higher speed. Now let's go back to that conversation that I just had about the importance of range on highway driving. I feel that that's the most important place to emphasize range, and yet the EPA doesn't do that. It emphasizes actually more city driving than highway and gives you a combined value. Now I'm not the only one that also had this thought in regards to the range of an electric vehicle having more priority in the highway than in the city. It's been talked about on social media for a while. In fact, one of the sites that has taken some action on this is Inside EVs. They've done various testing of electric vehicles, and they created what they referred to as a 70-mile-an-hour test for electric vehicles. And the idea of this test is to tell us the range that an electric vehicle has going 70 miles an hour for as long as it can. And I think this is a more useful value of range than what the EPA gives you. Let's take a look at the results of Inside EV's 70-mile-an-hour range test for various vehicles. And I am showing you one of their slides. Now, some of these vehicles are several years old. They don't do this test every year on every model, as that's quite a task to do, but they do it on real highways, and it's not a perfect test, but it does give you some good information as to how does the EPA range vary with this 70-mile-an-hour range. And there's the results. And notice the value in the middle there that shows you the actual range that they've gotten out of these cars. And you'll notice most of these cars have a range that goes in the 200s. You have several vehicles that have more than 300 and some as high as 500. But the important thing I want to do is now, let's go back to the original slide that I showed of the EPA ranges of the top vehicles, and notice how many of them were over 300. Now I know there's some differences between the vehicles shown between these two, but you can see that the EPA ranges, most of them in the top area were over 300. Now here, some of those same vehicles are showing up as in the 200. In other words, the EPA, as expected, since it's a combined city highway, will give you a range that's higher than you'll get on actual highway driving. Because as we know, the efficiency of an electric vehicle is lower on the highway. In other words, the range at higher speeds is less than the range at lower speeds. And so this is an important fact. And actually, I'd like to know really how far my vehicle will go on the highway. That's where I'll know how often I've got to make stops. So this is where I think the EPA missed the mark. And I think there's some value in understanding the 70-mile-an-hour range of an electric vehicle. The other important thing to point out is notice the different values on this Inside EV chart of how it compared with the EPA result. And you'll find that many vehicles, as expected, I guess, fall short of the EPA in the 70-mile-an-hour test. But there are several vehicles, Porsche Taycan in particular, that exceeds the EPA, which is kind of surprising, but a good value if you're a Porsche Taycan owner, because your range is much more on the highway than what's listed on the EPA. But most of them fall short of that. And I want to point out in particular how these values vary in the two cars that I've owned. The Ford Mustang Mach-E that I had, a 2021, standard battery, all-wheel drive, had a range of 211 miles. In my experience is the maximum range that I ever got out of that car was close to 200. So it fell short of that 211, but not by much. So now take a look at my Tesla Model Y. It had an EPA range of 330 when I purchased it earlier in 2023. But I've never gotten anywhere close to that. In fact, the most I could say that I got close to was around I would say the range would have been 280. I've never ridden the car to zero because that would be very risky. But I know with the percentage left in my vehicle, my highway range was around 280 miles versus 330. And that's a significant drop. But Teslas have been known for this if you've followed the media for a long time. In fact, a lot of bad press came out about Teslas and their EPA range. And now the EPA didn't audit on that and say they weren't following the test. Tesla just was choosing the test that worked the best for them, and it really didn't give you a good value for highway range. It gave you a good value of combined range. And I can say for my Tesla that I do get over 330 miles in ideal conditions when I'm driving in the city. If I were just driving in the city, I probably get upper 300s in range. So that's what's happening with the Tesla. And you can see how these cars vary in value. Oh, one other thing that I wanted to say is that recently Tesla on their website reduced the EPA range value of the Tesla Model Y long range from 330. Now it's showing 310. And I don't believe they've changed anything with the battery or the drivetrain. They've just made that value more conservative compared to what they had before. And 310 is still high in my real world estimate, but once again, keep in mind EPA is combined highway and city, but it's a lot closer to what you'd get. So in conclusion, I believe that the EPA range value is useful. It gives you some standard value of a range of an electric vehicle. But I think they really missed the mark by not showing the actual range of highway specifically and having a specific highway range value to go along with a combined value if that's what they wanted. So anyway, if you're in the market for an electric vehicle, I think it's important to know that and look into specifically what you're going to get on the highway with the vehicle you're purchasing. So keep that in mind. I'm going to have other videos on electric vehicle information and characteristics in the future. I've already done a series on the advantages of electric vehicles. Clearly, this is one that I think is something that you need to keep in mind. So please subscribe to my channel, give me a like or a comment, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.